My name is Clara Monroe, and I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would have to draw a line in the sand inside her own home. It was a Sunday morning in our cedar-shingled bungalow in Port Blossom, Washington. This is the kind of place where the mist from the Puget Sound settles on the pine needles like a dusting of sugar, and the morning light, when it finally breaks through the clouds, is a soft, pearlescent gray that makes our reclaimed fir floors gleam with a quiet warmth. I was curled in the window seat of our living room, a mug of ginger tea warming my hands, trying to soothe the persistent, rolling nausea that had become my secret companion for the past month. I was watching my husband, Julian, meticulously arrange slices of avocado on toast. He was an architect, and everything he did, from designing buildings to making breakfast, was done with a sense of precision and order. But this morning, his movements were too deliberate, his focus on the toast a little too intense. The air in our cozy home, usually filled with the scent of salty air and brewing coffee, felt static and heavy, holding its breath. After 4 years of marriage, I had learned the subtle language of Julian's anxieties. The way his brow would furrow just slightly, the rhythmic tap of his finger on the granite countertop, the way his gaze would fix on something inanimate when he had something difficult to say. He was about to build a bridge to a topic I didn't want to visit, and I had a deep, sinking feeling that the bridge led directly to his family. To understand, you have to understand where I come from. I was raised by my grandmother in a small cottage nestled in the Skagit Valley. She was a gardener, a woman who spoke the language of soil and seasons. She taught me patience, the beauty of slow growth, and the quiet strength of putting down roots. My world was one of fuchsias and hellebores, of the smell of damp earth and the satisfaction of a well-tended garden. I never had a large, boisterous family, and I always yearned for one. When I met Julian, with his easy laugh and his stories of bustling holiday gatherings, I thought I'd finally found that missing piece. Julian himself was a masterpiece of gentle charm and thoughtful intelligence. But his family, they were a different species of plant altogether. His mother, Beatrice, a retired gallery curator, moved through the world with an air of quiet judgment, her compliments always carrying a subtle barb. His sister, Serafina, 2 years my junior, was a wellness guide and yoga instructor who spoke in a breathy cadence about energies and auras, a vocabulary she often used to cloak her profound self-absorption. For years, I had practiced the art of placid acceptance. I'd smiled through Beatrice's suggestions on how to properly display my own textile art in our home, and nodded serenely when Serafina informed me the feng shui of our bedroom was stifling her chi. All the while, Julian would stand by, a handsome, well-meaning Switzerland, desperate to maintain a peace I felt was costing me my own sovereignty. That morning, as I watched him place a final, perfectly fanned avocado slice, I braced myself. I ran my hand over the soft, nubby wool of the blanket I'd woven last winter, a tapestry of sea blues and forest greens. This house was my sanctuary, a place we had filled with our shared dreams of a future, of children's laughter echoing off the wooden beams, of growing old together watching the ferries glide across the Sound. But the tense set of Julian's shoulders told me a storm was rolling in off the water, and it threatened to erode the very ground on which we'd built our life. Julian finally brought the plates to the small table by the window, setting one in front of me with a careful, almost reverent motion. He sat down, cleared his throat, and stared out at the gray expanse of the water. "Clara," he began, his voice tuned to a low, careful frequency. "Mom and Serafina are going to come up for a visit. They'll be here on Wednesday." My stomach, already a tempest, clenched. The nausea intensified. Beatrice and Serafina's last visit had culminated in Beatrice rearranging my kitchen pantry to be more logically organized, and Serafina declaring that the sage I burned to cleanse the space had a panicked, energetic signature. I forced a smile that felt brittle. "Oh, that's soon." I took a small, cautious bite of toast. "I hope the guest room bed is acceptable. Your mother mentioned the mattress was a bit too yielding for her back last time." Julian didn't meet my eyes. He picked up his fork and pushed a piece of avocado around his plate. "Actually, that's the other thing," he mumbled, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "There's a complication." I waited, the silence stretching between us. Serafina's pregnant, he said finally. And, well, she's been having a really rough time with it. Extreme morning sickness. And she says that being in your presence seems to make it worse. He took a breath, like a diver preparing to go under. She says it's something about your aura. I was thinking, just for the few days they're here, maybe it would be easier if you went and stayed with your friend Maya in the city. The words landed not like a slap, but like a slow, creeping frost, chilling me from the inside out. My hand froze, the toast halfway to my mouth. The scent of ginger and lemon from my tea suddenly seemed cloying, unbearable. Excuse me. My voice was quiet, but it held a new, sharp clarity that cut through the heavy air. You're asking me to leave our home. The home we own together. Because your sister finds my aura unsettling. Julian flinched, his handsome face clouding with a familiar, helpless guilt. It's just for a few nights, Clara. You know how Serafina can be. She's so sensitive right now, with the hormones and everything. Sensitive? Serafina, who had documented her entire fertility journey on Instagram with the hashtag sacred womb, was now painting me as the source of her discomfort. For 4 years, I had been her gracious host, smiling through her critiques of my cooking, my decorating, my very energy. I had been the sturdy, reliable oak, while she was the delicate vine that required constant, careful tending. And Julian. Julian was the gardener who always prioritized the vine. My heart began to beat a painful, heavy rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of hurt, disbelief, and a slow-burning rage I had suppressed for far too long. This house, with its scent of cedar and salt, with the warp and weft of my life woven into its very fabric, was now a place I was being asked to vacate. I was being treated like a seasonal nuisance, a draft to be sealed away for someone else's comfort. And the most agonizing part, the secret I held cupped in my hands like a fragile bird, was that I was just as sensitive as she was. I placed my toast back on the plate, my appetite completely gone. The careful arrangement of avocado now looked like a cruel joke. Julian, I said, my voice trembling with a control that felt more powerful than any shout. Do you hear yourself? Do you have any earthly idea how profoundly insulting that is? My hands were shaking, so I clasped them in my lap. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, saw not just the man I loved, but the man who was failing me. For 4 years, I have contorted myself into a pretzel to accommodate your family. I learned to make your mother's bland pot roast, because she finds my use of herbs overwhelming. I listened without comment when Serafina explained that my collection of vintage books carried sad energy. I did it all because I love you, and I wanted to be part of your family. I took a shaky breath, the weight of my own secret pressing on my lungs, demanding to be let out. Well, I have something to tell you too. I'm pregnant, Julian. 8 weeks. I've been sick as a dog for the last month. I was going to tell you tonight. I bought a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties to give you. I was planning a special dinner. My voice cracked on the last words. But since Serafina's aura is apparently dictating our family schedule, I guess now is as good a time as any. Julian's jaw went slack. The fork fell from his hand, clattering against his plate with a sharp, discordant sound that echoed the shattering of the morning's quiet. What? He whispered, his eyes wide, a storm of emotions, shock, joy, confusion, passing over his face. Clara, why didn't you tell me? His voice was tinged with an absurd note of injury, as if I were the one who had kept a vital secret. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Why? I pushed my chair back and stood up, the movement jerky and uncoordinated. Why do you think, Julian? So you could do this? So you could immediately pivot and ask me how we were going to manage my pregnancy around Serafina's needs? I'm your wife. We chose the paint for these walls together. We planted that Japanese maple in the front yard. We talked about raising our children here. And now, at the first sign of a real, tangible future, you're asking me to pack a bag and disappear so your sister can have a more pleasant vacation. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and sharp, but I refused to let them fall. My grandmother didn't raise me to wilt. She taught me that even the most delicate flowers need strong roots to survive the storm. I walked to the large window overlooking the sound, my back to him, watching a lone seagull fight against the wind. It felt like a mirror of my own struggle. I turned back to face him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "So tell me, Julian," I said, my voice dangerously level. "Whose pregnancy, whose future, whose presence in this house matters more? Mine or hers?" Julian looked trapped, a man caught between two worlds, his face a canvas of conflict. He ran a hand through his sandy hair, a gesture I knew meant he was overwhelmed and searching for an escape route. "Clara, that's not a fair question. They're my family. And what am I?" The question shot out of me, sharp and clean as a shard of glass. "A placeholder? A convenient partner until your real family needs you? I am your family now, Julian. Or did you miss that part of our wedding vows?" I began to pace the length of our living room, the soft rug doing nothing to cushion the anger that pulsed through me. "I get up every morning and feel like the world is spinning, but I make you coffee in that ridiculous pour-over contraption you love because the smell of it doesn't make me quite as sick as espresso. The scent of the fish market down the road makes me want to die, but I still walk there to buy the salmon you like for dinner. I am rearranging my entire sensory world for this baby, for our baby, and for you. And you want me to get in my car, feeling like this, and drive an hour to the city to sleep on Maya's couch?" My voice rose, filled with the pent-up frustration of years of silent accommodation. "You want to talk about fairness? Let's talk about last Christmas, when your mother told me my hand-woven table runner was charming, in a rustic way, as if I were a peasant selling my wares at a medieval fair. And you just smiled and passed the gravy. Or what about Serafina's birthday, when she unwrapped the first edition book I found for her and said she'd have to energetically cleanse it before she could put it on her shelf? You said she didn't mean anything by it." I stopped in front of him, planting my hands on my hips. "She always means something by it, Julian. And so does your mother. They're testing my boundaries. And every single time, you have let them win. You have handed them the keys to my home, to my dignity." I pointed a trembling finger toward the guest room. "If Serafina is so fragile that my very existence is a threat to her well-being, then she can check into the Salish Lodge. They have world-class spa services. I'm sure they can find someone to align her chakras. She'll be fine." Julian's face was pale, his eyes darting around the room as if the answer was written on the walls. "Clara, you're making this into something bigger than it is. It's just a few days." "No, you don't get it," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice to an intense, urgent whisper. "It has never been about just a few days. It's about respect. It's about whose comfort is prioritized in this partnership. It's about whether you see me as your equal, as the co-architect of this life, or as a temporary tenant who can be evicted at your family's whim." He looked up at me then, his brown eyes glistening with unshed tears of his own, of confusion, of guilt, of a dawning, terrible understanding. "Clara, I didn't think of it like that," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Mom and Serafina, they've always been a lot. I'm just so used to managing it, to keeping the peace." A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat, and this time it had nothing to do with the baby. It was the taste of his excuse. "And what about my peace?" I asked, my voice raw with the pain of it. "What about the peace I'm supposed to feel in my own home, with my own husband? I have a doctor's appointment on Friday, Julian. My first ultrasound. I was going to ask you to come with me. I wanted us to see our baby's heartbeat for the first time, together." The image, once so beautiful in my mind, was now tainted. "But I guess that's inconvenient. You'll be busy catering to your sister's delicate sensibilities while I'm supposed to be, where exactly? At Maya's? Watching it happen alone on a grainy monitor." He flinched as if I'd struck him. The reality of it, laid out so starkly, finally seemed to penetrate his well-honed defenses. "No," he whispered. "Clara, no. I didn't know. It shouldn't matter if you knew." I countered, my strength surging. "Pregnant or not, this is my home. You don't ask your wife to leave her home. Ever. It's the one rule. The only rule that matters." I leaned against the cool wood of the window frame, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a vast, aching emptiness. I looked at the man I had promised to build a life with, and I wondered if the foundation was irrevocably cracked. "Enough, Julian," I said, my voice gaining a steely calm that surprised even me. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind a hard, clear resolve. This is the moment. Right here, right now. You need to decide. Are you my husband, or are you still Beatrice's son and Serafina's brother, first and foremost? Because I will not come second in my own marriage. I will not be a guest in my own life. I crossed my arms over my chest, the simple gesture feeling like an act of self-preservation. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger. You need to call them. You need to tell them that they are welcome to visit, but this is my home, and I will be here. You need to tell them that their comfort does not, and will not ever again, supersede mine or the well-being of the family we are starting. If Serafina is so profoundly unwell that she cannot be in the same house as me, then you can offer to pay for her room at a hotel. A very nice one. That is a reasonable compromise. I held his gaze, unwavering. And from now on, when your mother makes a comment about my cooking or my art or the way I fold our damn towels, I expect you to say something. Not to start a fight, but to simply and calmly state, Mom, Clara does things her way, and I love it. That's it. That's all I've ever wanted. I let the words hang in the air between us, heavy with the weight of 4 years of unspoken needs. I saw the struggle in his eyes, the deep-seated conditioning warring with the love he felt for me. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the half-hour, each chime a hammer blow marking the seconds of his silence. I was laying down the blueprints for a new kind of marriage, a new kind of life. And I waited, my breath held, to see if he was brave enough to help me build it. The next 3 days were a quiet agony of waiting. Julian moved through the house like a ghost, his usual cheerful energy replaced by a heavy, contemplative silence. He made phone calls I couldn't hear, closing himself in his office. We ate our meals with a polite distance between us, the unspoken ultimatum a tangible presence at the table. I spent my time in my small studio at the back of the house, surrounded by spools of thread and bolts of fabric. I worked on a new weaving, my hands moving automatically, the shuttle passing back and forth, a rhythmic meditation that calmed the frantic beating of my heart. I was weaving a pattern of deep ocean blues and the resilient green of coastal pines, a landscape of strength and depth. I was weaving myself back together. On Wednesday morning, I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach. I didn't know what he had decided, what he had said to them. I put on a simple linen dress, the color of sea-washed stone, and went downstairs. Julian was in the kitchen, not making breakfast, but just standing there, staring at the phone on the counter. He looked up as I entered. "They'll be here in an hour," he said, his voice quiet. He looked exhausted, but something in his eyes had shifted. The helpless guilt was gone, replaced by a steady, sober resolve. "I told them," he continued, walking toward me. He stopped a few feet away, as if unsure of his welcome. "I told them exactly what you said. That this is your home, that you are my wife and the mother of my child, and that you would be here. I told them that if Serafina felt she couldn't manage it, I had booked a suite for her at the Heron's Nest Inn, and I would be happy to drive her there." I felt a tremor go through me, a release of tension so profound I had to put a hand on the back of a chair to steady myself. "And what did they say?" I whispered. A faint, wry smile touched his lips. Mom was silent. For a full 30 seconds. "I think that's a record." Then she just said, "Well, we'll see you at 11. "And Serafina?" Serafina cried. "She said I was choosing you over her." "And what did you say?" I asked, my heart in my throat. He finally closed the distance between us, taking my hands in his. His were warm and steady. I said, "Yes, Serafina. I am. Clara is my wife. You are my sister. The two are not in competition, but my priority is and always will be my wife and the home we build together." I told her I loved her, but that the dynamic had to change. Tears I had refused to shed for days now welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. They weren't tears of anger or hurt, but of a deep, soul-shaking relief. He had done it. He had stood on the foundation with me. The doorbell rang at precisely 11 o'clock. Julian squeezed my hand one last time before going to open it. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and followed him into the entryway. Beatrice and Serafina stood on the porch. Beatrice's face was a carefully blank mask, her posture rigid. Serafina's eyes were puffy and red-rimmed, and she clutched a silk scarf to her chest like a shield. She refused to look at me, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my left shoulder. "Mom." "Serafina." "Welcome," Julian said, his tone even and calm. He didn't rush to take their bags. He stood beside me, a silent, solid presence. Beatrice stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the living room. "The hydrangeas are looking a bit droopy, Julian," she commented, her voice tight. Before I could even register the familiar sting, Julian spoke. "Clara pruned them last week. They're just settling. I think they look fine." He said it simply, without aggression, a plain statement of fact. Beatrice's lips thinned, but she said nothing more. Serafina drifted into the room, her movements listless. She sank onto the sofa, pulling her scarf tighter. "The air in here feels so heavy," she murmured, loud enough for us all to hear. I felt the old reflex to apologize, to placate, rise in me. But then I looked at Julian, and I saw the strength in his stance, and I found my own. I walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, placing a hand gently on my own stomach. "I know what you mean," I said, my voice soft but clear. "The first trimester can be brutal. The nausea is just relentless, isn't it? I find that ginger tea helps a little. Would you like me to make you a cup?" The room went utterly still. Serafina's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Beatrice, who had been examining a piece of my textile art on the wall, froze mid-critique. "You're—" Serafina stammered, her carefully constructed aura of victimhood crumbling. "I am," I said with a small, gentle smile. 8 weeks. Julian and I are thrilled." I glanced at my husband, who was watching me with an expression of pure, unadulterated pride. The power dynamic in the room had just been recalibrated, not with a shout, but with a quiet, undeniable truth. I wasn't just a competing aura. I was a fellow traveler on the same difficult, miraculous journey. The tension in the room didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became less of a battlefield and more of an awkward, undeclared truce. Beatrice stared at me, her mask of cool composure finally cracking to reveal a flicker of something unreadable. Was it surprise? Regret? It was hard to tell. "Well," she said, her voice a little strained. "That is news. Congratulations, Clara." The words were clipped, but they were there. Serafina, for her part, looked utterly deflated. The wind had been taken out of her sails. "Yeah," she mumbled, looking down at her hands. "Congrats. I guess our kids can be friends." There was no warmth in it, but the overt hostility was gone, replaced by a sullen acceptance. I inclined my head, a silent acknowledgement. "Thank you," I said, my voice remaining even and calm. I looked from Serafina to Beatrice, and then to Julian, who stood as a steadfast pillar by the fireplace. "But I want to be very clear about something. We are all adults. We are about to become a larger family. And if we are going to spend time together in this house, it will be with a foundation of mutual respect. That means no more backhanded compliments about my art, Beatrice. And no more pronouncements about my energy, Serafina. My home is a place of peace, and I intend to keep it that way for my child." A heavy silence followed my declaration. I had laid my terms on the table, clear and non-negotiable. To my astonishment, it was Beatrice who broke it. She cleared her throat and smoothed the front of her cashmere sweater. "Perhaps," she began, her gaze shifting from me to her own daughter, "we have been inconsiderate." She looked at me directly. "Pregnancy is a delicate time. Perhaps I could help with the cooking while we're here. For both of you. Simple things. Nothing to upset the stomach." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised by the offering. It was an olive branch, albeit a small and thorny one. "That would be helpful," I conceded, testing the feel of the word. "Thank you, Beatrice." Serafina shifted on the couch, her pout softening into something more vulnerable. I'm not handling smells well either," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. It was the first truly human thing I'd heard her say all day. "Maybe we could open a window." Julian let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. He moved to the large picture window and pushed it open, letting in a gust of cool, clean air scented with salt and pine. The atmosphere in the room immediately felt lighter. "I'll get the bags," he said, a note of relief in his voice. "And tomorrow I'll make breakfast. And I promise not to burn the toast." A small smile touched my lips. "We'll see about that." It wasn't a magical resolution. It wasn't a warm, fuzzy family hug. The hurts were too deep for that, the patterns too ingrained. But it was a shift. It was the beginning of a new blueprint, a recognition that the old structure was unsound and a new one had to be built, beam by careful beam. I looked out the open window at our Japanese maple, its delicate red leaves trembling in the breeze. It was a small tree, but its roots were taking hold. I felt that our little family, mine and Julian's, and the tiny, nascent life growing inside me, could do the same. We could be strong, we could be resilient, as long as we were willing to stand our ground and fight for the light. That evening, after a stilted but civil dinner of plain roasted chicken and steamed vegetables prepared by Beatrice, the house fell quiet. Serafina had retired to the guest room early, looking drained. Beatrice was reading in an armchair, a fragile peace settling over the house. Julian and I found ourselves on the small deck overlooking the water, wrapped in thick woolen blankets against the evening chill. The sky was a deep, velvety indigo, dotted with stars. For a long time, we just sat in silence, listening to the gentle lap of the waves against the shore. He turned to me, his face illuminated by the soft glow from the living room window. His eyes were full of an emotion so deep and earnest it made my heart ache. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "I am so sorry." He reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. I was a coward. I was so afraid of their disapproval of the conflict that I was willing to sacrifice your peace. Your dignity. There's no excuse for it. Seeing you stand up to them today, seeing you claim your space with so much grace and strength, it showed me everything I was doing wrong. You are my home, Clara. You and this baby. My whole world is right here with you. His apology was more than just words. It was a confession, a promise, a vow renewed. It was the sound of a man who had finally chosen his own family. I squeezed his hand, leaning my head on his shoulder. I rested my other hand on my belly, where our future was quietly, miraculously knitting itself together. "Don't you forget it," I whispered, only half joking. "Never again," he murmured, kissing the top of my head. "I swear it. This is our foundation. Unshakable." I closed my eyes, breathing in the cold, clean air. I could feel the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. The past few days had been a trial by fire, a painful, necessary burning away of the things that were weakening us. But we had walked through it together. The road ahead with his family would likely still have its bumps. Healing isn't a straight line, and deep-rooted dynamics don't change overnight. But something fundamental had been fortified between us. Looking out at the vast, dark water, I thought of my grandmother and her garden. She always said that some plants need to be stressed to produce the most beautiful flowers. We had been stressed to the breaking point, but what was beginning to bloom in the aftermath felt stronger and more true than anything that had come before. It wasn't the big, messy, perfect family I had once dreamed of. It was something realer and far more precious, a family we were building ourselves, on our own terms, rooted in respect and a hard-won, quiet love. And for the first time in a long time, our house truly felt like home.